Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone, and I'm going to ask Superintendent Patterson if she'll do roll call, please.
Trustee Buckland?
Present.
Trustee Cartner?
Present.
Trustee Garrow? Sends regrets. Trustee McPherson?
Present.
Trustee McAllister?
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald?
Present.
First Vice Chair McMillan?
Present.
Trustee McCray?
Present.
Chair Petersmith?
Present.
Trustee Richards?
Present.
Trustee Swan?
Present.
Student Trustee Sidney Collard?
Present.
Thank you very much. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda items 2.02, 2.03, March 27th, as submitted. Moved by Trustee McCray, seconded by Trustee Richards. And ask you to vote online. No, I'm not getting it. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'll ask if there are any conflict of interest declarations at this point. Very much. We need a motion to move into committee of whole. Okay. Moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Cartner. Again, we'll just those in favor. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. We're going to begin our first action item with a presentation from Glen Tay Public School on the Guatemala Stove Project. And I'm going to ask Steve Ferguson to introduce the students. And I'd like to say welcome before you students begin. And we're looking forward to this. So come forward and
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I'm very pleased to introduce 4 exceptional grade 8 students who continually remind us of the genuine care and character that helps make a difference both within and outside our school community. Kara, Lily, Kate, and Amelia are here tonight to share their experiences alongside Mr. Keith Walker, a retired Upper Canada secondary school teacher and representative of the Guatemala Stove Project. Thank you for providing them the opportunity to speak about their ongoing youth support initiatives and most recent provincial recognition of their work. Through you, Chair, I would like to call upon Mr. Walker and the girls to begin the presentation.
thank you.
Good evening. I've been a volunteer with the Guatemala Stove Project for the past 6 years, and I'm now a member of the Board of Directors with that registered charity. I've been working directly with students at Glen Tay Public School for the past 4 years and have sort of slipped into a role of educational liaison with the Stove Project. I don't have too much to add to that, but I would like you to be aware of the fact that Glen Tay is a school with a population of under 200 students this year, and over the past 7 years, Glen Tay students have raised over $11,000 for the people of Guatemala through the Stove Project. It's a very active social justice program in that school. Students are all aware of living conditions in Guatemala, which is very much a third world country. And now they have a special connection with students in Guatemala. But I'll let the girls explain that to you.
Hello, my name is Amelia Bowie Buffum.
I'm Kara Cameron.
I'm Kate Thornton.
And I'm Lily Strong.
We are from Glen Tay Public School, and we are here to tell you about our project in Guatemala. Guatemala is a country in Central America, which is the strip of land connecting North and South America. Guatemala is immediately south of Mexico and bordered on the west by the Pacific Ocean, on the east by Belize and Honduras, and on the south by El Salvador. It is approximately 1.5 times the size of New Brunswick and has a population of about 14 million, which is 60% made up of indigenous Mayan people. Guatemala is a land of volcanoes. It rises from the sea to a height of 10,000 feet in the mountainous northwestern Altiplano. It is here that the Guatemala Stove Project does its work.
The Guatemala Stove Project is a Canadian registered charity, which has been in existence now for 13 years. It is a grassroots project based in Perth, Ontario, having been started by Tom Clark of Perth Valley. The primary function of the project is to build masonry cookstoves for the poor Mayan farmers in the Altiplano. These stones increase the life expectancy of families by as much as 15 years, according to a United Nations study, by reducing pulmonary and eye disease. They also reduce carbon emissions and deforestation, therefore erosion, because families burn 50% less fuel with a stove as compared to the traditional 3-stone open fire.
The project has also built a school, Escuela Los Niños de Sam, in memory of the son of Tom Clark and Rita Redner, who was killed in a tragic accident. In the same village, Pan McKean, the Memorial Fund built a corn mill and, in conjunction with the Perth Rotary Club, has now completed the Pan Agua project, which transports water 7 kilometers from a mountain spring to a holding tank in the village.
The Stove Project has also conducted a fundraiser for 2 years. With the help of Lanark County students, the Mayan students of Panamaquim have been provided with a lunch every school day, which is rich in protein because 80% of Mayan children suffer from malnutrition. Glente's association with the Guatemala Stove Project goes back 7 years and started with a class project, which raised over $800 and built 4 stoves.
The second year, $670 was raised. Glente contributed to the nutrition program, and then during its second and final year, 4 students, Emily Richardson, Sarah Noonan, and Karen Dye, participated in an Upper Canada Board Save the World competition with our Panamaquim Nutrition Sustainability Project, where we won $1,000. We also raised a total of a further $3,300 for a total of $4,300 to ensure proper nutrition for the students of the village of Panamaquim.
Last year, our group decided to change our focus to education. For Mayan children in Guatemala, free education is provided only until grade 6. In February 2012, a delegation of 7 men and women from the village of Chuicutama walked for 6 hours in order to speak to the Guatemala Stove Project volunteers who were visiting Panamaquim. They requested $700 in order for 7 of their students to continue in grade 7 the following year. In the spring of 2012, our group raised $850 and ensured continuing education for those 7 students.
The Stove Project works with 3 Mayan nonprofit organizations, SEDEC in Ami in the city of Xela, and AMID in the town of Comitancil. These organizations coordinate the procurement of materials and the labor in building the stoves, as well as identifying villages and individuals in need of assistance. They also coordinate emergency aid and identify other potential projects in which the GSP might become involved. It was AMI which assisted us in implementing the chicken coops, and AMI is currently assisting us to locate students in need of scholarships.
Clara Collop and her daughter Utsil visited our school last year during a speaking tour of Eastern Ontario. At the moment, we have identified 13 students who are receiving monthly amounts in order to complete grade 8. As well, 2 older students from Panamaquim are receiving assistance from the Sam Clark Memorial Fund in order to attend university.
During a 2-week visit last May, GSP volunteers Keith Walker and Paul Harini met with 10 of the 13 students, their families, and teachers to discuss their academic progress and plans for the future. Our objective this year is to raise as much money as possible to ensure continuing education for the 13 students we are currently supporting, and for those who prove capable, even beyond. We would like to introduce you to those 10 students. The first 4 are from the village of Chuicutama, which is beyond the mountains of this valley.
First is Miguel. He's 13 years old and attends grade 8 in San Hu. He has 4 sisters, ages 10, 8, 6, and 2. Next is Manuel, age 17. Manuel lives with his father, his mother, his 2 brothers, and 3 sisters. Antonio Lopez is 15. 7 people live in her house. Katerina is 16 in grade 8. She is one of 5 children.
For Chuicutama, the harvest has failed now 3 years in a row. During her visit to Glente last year, Claire was asked, "What will they eat?" Her answer was nothing. Now with some assistance, they will buy corn from Mexico, which will sustain them until the next harvest.
The following day in the village of Cantel, Keith and Paul met with the other 7 students and their families. Adianeth is 14 years old. Her favorite subject is math, and she wishes to become a nurse.
Veronica Sebastiana is 14. Veronica loves math and would like to become an accountant or business administrator.
Vilmar Miguel is 15. He loves language and would like to be a lawyer.
Dugri Lisandro is 12 years old. His favorite subject is language. He wants to be a mechanic. Yoselin Paula is 14 years old. She loves math and would like to be an accountant. Nehemiah Castro is 13 years old. Loves science and would like to study to be an architect. Carlos Alfredo is 14. He likes math and would like to be a mechanic. Carlos's teacher would not release him because he was writing tests. This is his mother signing for him.
All of these young students live in small mountain villages. They must walk long distances from their homes to the towns where their schools are located. Because of the distance involved, they must remain there during the week and stay with friends or relatives, returning only on the weekends.
Their homes are mostly one-room adobe houses with galvanized metal roofs and dirt floors. Mayan families are often quite large, and many people are living in these tiny houses. Many of their families cook on open fires, which fill the houses with acrid smoke. There's no plumbing, and women often walk great distances for firewood or water. The families are subsistent farmers. They eat what they grow.
Even in good years, people have to go for weeks near the end of the growing season, eating little more than tortillas and drinking nothing but water. All farming is done by hand, and many of the fields are situated on steep mountain slopes. The staple crops are corn, beans, and squash. The Maya call them the Three Sisters. They are grown together in the fields. The growing season begins with the rains in late March or early April, and is ongoing, generally ending in November.
A family's food supply is hung from the rafters and dried. Before the sun comes up, the women of the house take down enough corn to grind for the day's tortillas, which are made by hand and cooked over the fire. Most meals consist of tortillas, tamales, with frijoles, which are beans cooked with onion and sometimes a bit of garlic. Most women's clothing is traditional and is woven by hand at home with traditional village patterns. Most boys and men nowadays tend to wear North American clothing, which is acquired secondhand in the markets.
Life is very difficult for the Maya of Guatemala.
As we said, they are 60% of the population, but these subsistence farmers have been forced by the dominant Ladino people further and further into the mountains onto only 10% of the land in Guatemala.
As their population increases, it will become more and more difficult to grow enough to eat. If future generations are to have any hope at all, it must be in fields other than subsistent agriculture.
The key to their future is education. We hope, with your help, to assist a few young people to achieve a better future for themselves and their families.
Do you have any questions for these young ladies?
Thank you very much. Yes, definitely. Questions or comments? Greg?
I just want to say that the Upper Canada School Board is extremely proud of your efforts and what you're doing because, you know, we hear about all kinds of fundraising venues that are happening within our communities and in Canada, but it's really, really interesting to hear about those types of efforts in different places in the world. So congratulations to you all. And one question I do have to the girls is, you talked about this year's objective has to do with education, is that correct? And so how much money do you have to make in order to, or what is your goal in terms of making money in order to put these, you know, help these students move forward? What is your goal for this year?
Our goal is always changing. We are adapting more and more students, but it depends on what grade they are in. For example, the grades prices range from $139 to $1,520.
So like to move one grade forward, do they know what that costs?
Well, they do 6 years of Primario, which is $139 per year, and then they do 3 years of Basico, which is $316, and then they do 2 or 3 years of Magisterio, which is $1,520
Per student.
per year. Yeah, per student.
At the moment, if I could just add a bit of clarification. When we were originally asked for money to help children continue in school, it was because for the particular students whose parents we met with, they had a school in the village only for pre-med, and it wasn't, the cost of that was not beyond reach for the families. But in order for them to continue in grade 7 last year, they needed $100 for each of the kids, each of the 7 kids, which was when we originally had our conversations about fundraising. And they have 3 years in this village, which is a 3-hour walk over the mountain. They have to remain in town for the week and then go home in the weekend. I should add that we're in regular touch with these families and kids through our contacts in Guatemala. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 members walk into that village over the mountain in February and meet with the families. But if the children continue in school beyond Basico, which is where they are now, then it's going to be more money. And these young ladies are intent on continuing with their fundraising and taking it with them on into high school next year. Also, something that hasn't been mentioned, you probably read beforehand, they were awarded the Ontario Council for International Cooperation award in January for their efforts. And theirs was one of 5 awards. The other 4 were all adults in grad school who were doing work in other countries. So this was a singular honor for them and a great recognition of their work.
Well, just to reiterate, we're very proud of them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say you guys make a great team, clearly. I loved how you were all speaking, and you've clearly done a presentation together before, and it was wonderful. Also, a lot of people have already probably told you this, but congratulations. I know, like, I and many people here don't know that many young students who would take on an initiative this big and this powerful. And I also wanted to let you know I'll be sharing your story with the student leaders from our school board. So a lot of people are going to hear about you guys.
I believe that the young ladies have a gift for each of you.
Chair, may I ask a question?
These bracelets that they're going to give out are made in Guatemala. They're little friendship bracelets woven there. And our volunteers buy them in Guatemala and bring them back here and sell them. And the profits from that are used to fund projects here. So one of the main fundraisers that these girls have done is to sell these bracelets in schools.
Trustee McDonald?
No,
Oh,
just Alistair wants, so just don't let him walk away.
no, I know, 'cause we still have some people that may want to ask some questions, so the girls are just passing things out. Yeah, we're still under control here, Chair Peterson, I swear we are.
I apologize if
Thank you
I've,
very much. No,
messed up the agenda.
no, don't apologize at all. Okay, we're going to get the girls, go back to the microphones. Anyone online have any comments or questions first?
Yes, Chair, I do, please, if I could.
Okay, Trustee McAllister?
I really want to applaud the girls and their class for this initiative. I think it is not only an educational experience, but it's a humanitarian outreach. I want to ask the girls this question. How sustainable is the work that they are doing? I know they have mentioned that they are going into high school next year and that they are going to continue. What happens in the future, I guess, is the question I ask.
Okay, any one of you can answer that question.
We would like to, the work that we're doing should be very sustainable. We have recently taken the Ottawa Guatemala Stove Project branch under us to help fundraise also, so that next year we're going into high school and stuff, and we are going to continue, but just for extra backup. And we are also, when we are leaving high school, we're going to take younger kids under to carry on our work.
Okay, thank you. Trustee McPherson, you wanted to ask a question, comment?
Trying to put my thoughts together. The Guatemala Stove Project is literally a community effort in the Perth area. So my understanding is you are still supporting the construction of stoves, or you're also now moving into supporting students in their extra to advancing their academic goals. Is that correct?
We are strictly students, but we are associated with the Guatemala Stove Project.
Okay. I followed this through the papers for about the last 7 years, and it's, like I said, it's a huge community effort. Festival of Maples, Bowls for Soup Bowls project. Perhaps you could explain to us what a Guatemala stove is and how it has such an impact upon a family, because on your slide set there's 2 or 3 slides of different styles of stoves. It's hard to believe that a stove would have a huge impact on a family, but it is my understanding that this is indeed the case.
If I may. The stoves that the Guatemala Stove Project builds are masonry cook stoves. They're built with cinder blocks, 3 tiers high. They're filled with volcanic pumice for insulation. Within that shell is a stove, or an area of fire brick, a firebox, and it's covered with a steel plancha that has a top on it that's very much like a cook stove that you would have seen in Canada. And then, of course, the most important part of the stove is the chimney, which conducts smoke out of the stove. I've had to spend time documenting stoves in houses that are still cooking over open fires, and it's more than I can do to remain in the house for 5 minutes. I came back from my last trip documenting stoves and contracted pneumonia, and I'm pretty sure it was from being in houses with open fires. What the stoves do is they reduce the amount of combustibles by 50%, usually wood, that are being burned in the stove. By doing that, they're reducing emissions by 50%, and they're reducing deforestation by 50%. At the same time, the United Nations has estimated that the life expectancy of a family is increased by 15 years by having a cook stove. They're not for heat. The people in Guatemala don't need them for heat. They're strictly for cooking. And usually a woman is cooking in a household for 4 to 5 hours a day. So these stoves, we've built now more than 5,000 of them over the last 13 years. And there are many, many more that are needed. There are 8 million Maya in Guatemala, and the vast majority of them are still cooking over open fires. It's important to note that worldwide, it's estimated that more than 50% of carbon emissions are from cooking fires. If everybody in the world who was cooking over a fire had a stove, that would make a very serious dent in carbon emissions and, of course, in global warming.
Thank you very much. Trustee Kartner.
In the community that I come from, there's a foundation that is geared towards the people of Guatemala as well. It's called the Andy Gump Foundation. I don't know whether you're familiar with it or not, but it's a foundation that was created as a result of the death of a child, and their parents began this foundation, and they built schools in Guatemala. So I'd like to talk to you later about how you could get together with these people and maybe build on both of your foundations. And secondly, I'd like to ask the girls the significance of their scarves.
These are scarves that we sell for like our money that we use towards the project, and we sell them at our school and at fundraisers, and they're $10, and we always wear them when we present.
They're
Yeah.
handmade.
And they're made in Guatemala?
And they're handmade in Guatemala and sold in the markets.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online that would like to make an additional comment?
Just a final question, Chair, if I could.
Thank you.
Girls, how are your language and your Spanish skills in particular? Are they developing?
Yeah, we know a few words, but we are planning on taking a few courses on it before we go down next year.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I want to personally thank the principal, Steve Ferguson, and Mr. Walker. You set excellent examples of adults. Amelia, Kara, Lily, and Kate, to me, you represent all that is good in today's youth. You are standing up for what you believe in, and I am sure that through this project that each one of you has changed in a way. We take so much for granted living where we live, but I'm sure that having been touched by the lives of those who are less fortunate than us, that you have personally changed in many ways that will be lifetime changes. We at the Upper Canada District School Board are incredibly proud of you for what you're doing. There is nothing more powerful than the engagement of our today's youth. And anyone who says that today's youth don't make a difference aren't watching you right now, because you're amazing people, and there are people in the world who are better because of you. So thank you so much for your presentation, and we appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back. Can you take the next item here? I'm just going to go back and say
The next item up is an update on the process for pupil accommodation, ARC reviews. Mr. Dawes?
Thank you, Chair. I must say it's going to be difficult to follow that last presentation, but I'll do my best. Yeah.
During the ARC process, we were in a stove.
Different kind of stove, but it's still notwithstanding.
Thanks.
Chair and trustees, on February the 27th, I had an opportunity to present to you the final wrap-up report for the Boundary 2020 review and Building 2020 process. Thank you, David. And in alignment with that meeting, it was suggested at that time that it would be beneficial for the trustees to also receive an update as to how we as an organization conduct ARC reviews or school closure reviews. So that is the purpose of tonight's presentation, is to just take you through one more time the process that we follow when we conduct ARC reviews. And so I want to do that. You have the report with you. It's Appendix A to your placeholder report, so all of the detailed information is in there. I just want to hit the highlights for you, knowing that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. But I would like to do that by just taking you through several practical examples. I want to use the Boundary 2020 review itself and the Cornwall Community Schools review from 2009 as examples to demonstrate how we've conducted those reviews in the past and how our system process itself has been updated over the years to align with your requirements as an organizational lead and with the ministry's pupil accommodation review guidelines. So I'll start, if I could, by talking a bit about the Ministry Accommodation Review Guidelines from 2006 and the Upper Canada District School Board Policy 413, originally revised in 2007, that was used for the 2007-8 Boundary 2020 review. So on October 19th, 2005, the board approved this motion, that administration conduct a single study of all families of schools in the Upper Canada in order to address program enhancement, consolidation, and boundary alignment. So that was the initiation from board motion that kicked off the system-wide review. At that time, we weren't calling it Boundary 2020. We simply had information and a request from the trustees to proceed, and so there was a lot of background work going on following this motion to prepare for our school closure process. The board at that time already had policy 413 in place, and we were going to follow the consultation requirements as aligned with 413 at that time. But in June 2006, the Ministry of Education released its pupil accommodation review guidelines, and it did that to ensure that all school boards across the province of Ontario were following the ministry's expectations for community consultation before entering into these types of reviews. And so as a result of the pupil accommodation review guidelines, we were required as a board to update our policy 413, which we did. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to take you through the highlights of the pupil accommodation review guidelines from 2006, which are in your report under section 3.2. And again, the guidelines provided the framework for policy 413 and the Boundary 2020 review, and they generally fell under 4 categories as they related to the formation of accommodation review committees, or ARCs, as we've come to know them, consideration by the board of the value that schools provide to their respective communities, opportunities for public consultation, and of course review timelines. Now again, the information is there in the report for you, but I wanted to draw attention specifically, if I could, to section 3.2.2 related to school valuation. When you look at the accommodation review guidelines from 2006 and the updated version, which I'll get to later, there's a lot of language around school valuation. School valuation was identified as a primary focus for the review of schools in the guidelines, and accordingly, the guidelines specified that boards were to develop a generic school valuation framework to support the ARC assessment of value to the student, value to the community, value to the school board, and value to the local economy for each school being reviewed. Now, the guidelines also specified that once the ARC process began, boards were to present alternate accommodation plans for the schools under review. Now, to meet the ministry's expectations for the generic school valuation framework, the Boundary 2020 review applied a set of tools called the Essential Schools Index and the Effective Schools Rubric, and a copy of the templates that were used to produce that information for each regional ARC for the Boundary 2020 review is provided as attachments 1A and 1B to your report. So I wanted to draw that to your attention because that was the way that the Upper Canada Board customized its approach to meeting the ministry's expectations as related to school valuation. I also wanted to draw your attention to section 3.3 if I could, additional information. There's some additional information in the review guidelines that I think are noteworthy. For example, there are several instances where identified in the guidelines where boards are not obligated or were not obligated to undertake an accommodation review. Most notably, when a board is considering the relocation of a grade or grades or a program where the enrollment in the grade or grades or program constitutes less than 50% of the enrollment of the school. It's important to note that. And this point is particularly relevant to the Boundary 2020 review because the board was not actually obligated to undertake the ARC process for the consideration of grades 7 to 12 schools, French language programs, or most of the other boundary adjustments that were made because it didn't constitute a move of 50% of the students in most situations. But we took that on as a part of the Boundary 2020 review because including all of these review items as a part of the ARC process was a logical and transparent approach for the board to take at that time to facilitate good decision making. So in February 2007, the board updated its School Policy 413, and that's what was used for the Boundary 2020 review. Oops. I'll move this forward. Oh, try that. Nope. Nope. There we go. Okay. Thank you. So in the report, I've provided you with the Boundary 2020 general timelines. This is a really great way of looking at Policy 413 in action, if you will. And you can see from the timelines incorporated in that were the actual changes to school closure Policy 413. There's reference there to the development of the Essential Schools Index and Effective School Rubrics templates. We had to populate those particular tools with the relevant data to make them applicable for the ARC reviews. We had to advertise the Boundary 2020 review. We had to organize the actual ARC committee. The ARC meetings themselves were organized and carried through. That went right through until December 2007. Then we got into the decision-making process itself, which concluded in May of 2008. So at the conclusion of the Boundary 2020 review, there were a few advancements that were made over the next year or so that required the board to again update Policy 413. One of those events was the ministry review of the Boundary 2020 process itself. Trustees may recall at the conclusion of the Boundary 2020 review, there was an appeal by several of our school communities, and a facilitator was brought in, David Cook, to review our process, and he concluded that although the process was fine, he did have some suggestions to improve our overall Policy 413, including looking at the membership of the accommodation review committees, developing an ARC terms of reference, and maybe providing a little more detail on the availability of financial information for ARC discussion purposes. We also, in the spring of 2009, developed an extensive survey that was made available across the system, and received that information and provided that to trustees. We also received in 2009 revised ministry pupil accommodation review guidelines. So the ministry updated its own guidelines in 2009 and again required school boards to update their policies to reflect these new guidelines. And so in 2009, our Policy 413 was once again revised and approved. And that actual policy is provided for you in your report as attachment 5, but it looks like this. And so with all of those updates, all of that new information, the board did have an opportunity to put that into action and did so through the Cornwall Community Schools Review. And the motion to proceed with that particular review happened on May 20th, 2009. And accordingly, we proceeded. And we have a general timelines chart provided again for your information as attachment 6. And you can see somewhat similar to the Boundary 2020 review, although this time we didn't have to do the preparatory work around the Essential Schools Index and Effective Schools Rubric. The board motion in May, ARC orientation meetings in September, the ARC public meetings themselves began in October and concluded at the end of January. ARC accommodation report was completed by the end of February, and then again into the decision-making process, which concluded in May of 2010. So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say we have a school closure policy that we can be proud of as an organization. We've tested it on several occasions with success, certainly from a process point of view. We're certainly in alignment with the Ministry of Education's Pupil Accommodation Review Guidelines. Our process itself has been tested several times through external facilitation and has met that test. And I think trustees can feel satisfied that if required, we could certainly move forward with this process as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawes. Any questions or comments? We'll start online. Any, on the telephone lines, any questions, comments?
Yes, I do, Superintendent, through you, Chair.
Yes?
I'd just like to ask a bit more about how the recommendations of the community members surveyed, the parent council surveyed. I kind of couldn't really find it in the document. If you could expand on how the representation of the public on the ARCs is being changed, that would be a start for me.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I've provided as one of the appendices a template showing the requested or required ARC membership breakdown. That's attachment 7. And it reads, the Cornwall Community Schools Review, which was the example in this case, is an advisory body intended to assist the decision-making responsibilities of the Board of Trustees. ARC members are appointed by the Board to offer as best possible a balanced range of representation, including parents, educators, board officials, and community members. And it specifies, this was a follow-up to the original review, trustees are not required to serve on ARCs. That was an update to the most recent version of the school closure policy. So you can see from this attachment, there's been a definitive effort by the board to reference this in its actual policy and to bring this template forward to the Board of Trustees for approval before ARCs are actually brought into actual action as a part of the review process.
Thank you.
May I have a secondary question to that?
Yes, you can.
But there's been no actual numbers laid out as to how many board staff or employees are sitting on these ARCs.
Through you, Chair, no, the policy doesn't specify an exact number. It was intended, I think, through the wish of trustees to keep it fluid enough that it would be brought forward to you as a governing body to approve it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. Just to follow up to that, Mr. Dawes, you've basically highlighted some of the issues I wanted to bring up. The fact that we made those adjustments to ensure that trustees weren't on it, we found some opportunities for improvement as we move forward. And just in relation to the number of staff that are associated to it, I think what we've seen in the past is that we've had some fairly healthy mixes. We need to have some staff associated. Staff are there as well for guidance and facilitate. And they present the information that is shared with them through the representatives, whether they be parents or community members. Having sat through some of these, certainly I have no concern that what was shared with the group has ever been diluted in any way or misrepresented. A question I have for you, though, when we look at, I think it was around 3.2 something, the value, the school profile. When we look at, there's a section here that talks about enrollment. We kind of look back, we look forward with enrollment. When you're looking at this, when we do this, enrollment is a key indicator. But what we need to understand is perhaps why the enrollment is where it is. And so, do you also include market share at that time as well?
Through you, Chair, yes.
Rates, right?
Yeah, Trustee, absolutely. That's information that we do collect regularly through the Planning and Research Department, and certainly at your disposal to relay that information to you at any time. Yeah.
The reason I ask that is that sometimes we need to understand that a certain area may have a declining enrollment due to birth rate, but if we have established boundaries where we have schools where our children are deciding to go to one school over another, and that in some cases can be our own schools, we need to make sure that we're aware of that. And in some cases it may, some schools may have a tremendous value to that community, but a majority of the people have chosen to go somewhere else. So we just need to ensure that we have that information when we review any of these things moving forward, if we review any of these things moving forward.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may. Director, go ahead.
Just a point. Phil, I'd like to thank you again for the quality of your work. When you're listening to it on the line, it's really quite impressive how you've become such an expert in this area. And thank you for the very professional way you made the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee McCray.
Through you, Chair.
Oh, hang on just a sec. We'll get you in a second, Trustee Swan. Trustee McCray.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I also want to thank Phil because I remember when this came up at our last meeting, and I was one of the trustees that wanted additional information on this. And after I read this, I really had no idea all the variables that were involved in making a decision such as important as this decision. And also what I liked was how those decisions were weighted by a percentage. And so there's there's a whole scientific component to this, not just enrollment. There are so many variables to consider. So thank you for setting me straight. I appreciate it.
Trustee Swan.
Through you, Chair.
Yes.
I'm still concerned that we really aren't concentrating on the results based on the feedback that was received from the survey, because the majority of the respondents indicated that there was an appropriate balance of principals and community members, but they felt the parents and students were underrepresented. And I just don't think we've been clear enough with these guidelines in this report as to how we're going to move forward on that, and as well on how we're going to provide more financial information to these ARC committees is my other concern.
Do you want to respond to that? Anyone want to respond to that? Can you just clarify exactly what your question is? There seems to be a little bit of uncertainty.
Well, I'd like to know if we're still going to look at developing this further and making the ARC committee membership more detailed as to how much board representation we're going to have, how many community members we're going to have. I do understand now trustees aren't a part of that role. And then I haven't seen it addressed really how we're going to provide financial information to these ARC committees. I haven't seen that addressed at all in this report.
Through you, Chair, if I could. My interpretation of the approach that the Board of Trustees has taken on this is a recognition of the different makeup of our various communities across our board. And so when we get into sensitive reviews like this, an ARC, the way that an ARC is formed in one part of our board might not look the same as in another part. And it actually takes a lot of effort, deserved effort, but effort nonetheless, to find the right membership on these types of committees that will help the board move forward in a positive way with good information. And I think the intention of the board when it set up the policy the way it did, again, was to receive this information on a case-by-case basis so that all of the different factors could be weighed appropriately and an approval decision made by the Board of Trustees specific to the needs of that particular ARC area. That's the intention I understood when we brought it forward. The same is true with financial information, and as Trustee McDonald indicated earlier around enrollment information, we want to hear what the Board of Trustees is looking for in the way of information, so we can certainly make our best judgment early on in the process to provide information that we think is necessary and useful, but we want to be able to add to that as we move through the review. So it's rather open-ended on purpose.
Trustee McDonald, want to add to that?
Yeah, and I should step in before you speak because you keep beating me to the punch, but certainly that is one of the issues that we had some difficulty around, is that although we may have an ARC process underway, we may have difficulty if we say we need to have 12 people on an ARC committee. We may have difficulty in finding 12 people. But I think there was some language, and I'm trying to find it. I thought there was some language to indicate that the staff would not to be greater than 50%, encompassing of the people that were there. Perhaps it was just a discussion I had at some point, but I know that when we were looking at at some of the things in Cornwall, certainly if we look at the room, there are a number of staff that are there that probably exceed the number of parents and community people that were on the ARC. However, the people that were there at the meeting were not part of the ARC committee. Oftentimes you're having staff attend a meeting to share information, provide reports back, to answer the questions of the ARC. And so I think we need to be careful of who attends isn't necessarily the committee. But there certainly are some key resources associated to the ARC from staff, but we pull in resources as we require. As it relates to the financial aspect, and just I guess a general comment is we need to keep in mind that we want to ensure that we have a process in place that we follow the ministry guidelines. We have a policy in place that says we do. We want to make sure that we do have feedback, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the decision is the Board of Trustees. So yes, we want to have feedback, but we also need to be cognizant that the ARC is a formal process, but you will receive feedback in an informal way as well from your community members. And so we need to be careful that just because we have an ARC, there are other comments and other feelings that will come forward as well. So we need to make sure as trustees in our role that we are always aware and cognizant of what the community is saying, whether they are on an ARC or not on an ARC process, involved in an ARC process.
Trustee McPherson.
I have a problem with basing any decision too much strictly on financial. I was a veteran of the Boundary 2020 process, and I believe we had student achievement first and foremost in our minds when we went through that process. Closing schools should not focus on finance. Second question, ask for clarification. The first few rounds of accommodation review processes across the province, the role of trustee varied from region to region. I realize now that we are not part of the ARC committee, which I feel is a good thing because we are the decision-making body. Is there consistency across the province now in that trustees do not take part as members of the ARC committees?
Yes, I don't have the answer to that, but Trustee McDonald, do you know?
I can just provide some feedback to you, very anecdotal, based on conversations I've had with other trustees associated to OPSPA or any other professional development opportunities that we may have. The ARC process is very different from one school board to another. The flavor of the day with many school boards is now to call them parks as opposed to ARCs. They call them program and accommodation reviews. They're as complex as required in some areas because of the political nature associated to it. And they are so, in some areas, less complex and more flexible to be able to meet the needs of the communities. But it really, really, really does depend on the board and I guess the political nature associated to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more comments, questions on the phone lines?
Yes, Chair, I have one question, please.
Okay, Trustee McAllister.
I fully understand how sensitive any ARC process is. And it is a community issue and it is extremely political, but how proactive are we as a board now and in the future in terms of gauging public views and addressing future alignments? For example, to what extent do we follow or to what extent do we lead for the benefit of the students and the communities involved? And I don't mean to get into specific examples, but I'm asking a general question.
If I may, Chair, could I take a response to that?
Yes, go ahead.
John, you asked a very important question. Should the board lead or follow? And in fact, it has to do both. In my years now dealing with teaching for learning and creating proper environments for kids to learn in, we've had places where we know the school will be there forever because it's a public school, there's nothing up in that area at all. And it would be as close to untouchable, and they could get down to 45, 50 kids. But you have other areas in our board and other jurisdictions where we'd have to follow the lead of some parents who have said to us before, very creative, if you don't have the courage to deal with an ARC and close the school, then we're leaving. They're either going to the separate board, or in most cases, and Phil will tell you about this, in the vast majority of cases, they want to move beyond their school to one of our schools. In fact, the chair of the board had a very awkward situation several years ago where two of his schools, parents were choosing, and the school of their own community they were saying they didn't want to go to, is it gotten so small that there were only 2 classrooms needed of the nearly 15 in the school. And basically we created almost K-7 school with 2 classes in it, and we had kindergartens to grade 3 and 1, and in the other class we had basically the 5, 6, and 7s. In that particular situation, several parents said, this has become a one-room schoolhouse. Our kids don't get plays, we don't get musicals, we can't get enough kids together to put a baseball team together or a soccer team. Basically, they just show up to school and they get French and so forth. And what happened was those schools are also extremely expensive. You have to heat the entire school. As you know, the legislation says that you have to have a full-time principal at all your places, or the equivalent. And what happens is that when you're staffing that particular way, they're very, very expensive to staff. And so the community comes in some of those situations and says, please, you can't make a decision, we'll make it for you. However, others, we know, are very attached to their community school. And we had one gentleman in an ARC who explained to us very quickly that he'd like to have a one-room school. Now, he was very alone, but the idea of a one-room schoolhouse had a great deal of romance to him, as it reminded him of his growing up. But the fact is the vast majority of parents in these situations are saying, we'd like to get to a school that will give our kids a 21st century style of education. So it's a combination. We have to listen to what the parents are saying, and then I don't think we ever take our professional hat off. As the chair of the board at the time said, we're not here about schools, we're here about learning. And the parents really identified with that, and so did the community. So it's both push and pull.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Trustee McDonald.
So my memory does come back once in a while. I think it was during our deliberation that we talked about the composition of the ARCs, and at that point we decided trustees were not going to be involved. And looking through the report again here right now, the decision to not necessarily stipulate the number of staff, or the maximum number of staff, or the minimum number of community and parents involved. There is a review of who our ARC committee will be. The board has to approve that. So at that time, we have an opportunity to see who will be on the ARC. And if it's lopsided, then there's an opportunity for us as trustees to throw it back and have a second sober thought look at that. So I think it was during the discussion that we talked about the 50% or not 50%, but the solution I think we came up with is that making sure that we resolved it with a motion here.
Thank you. Chair Petersman, are you on the phone? Chair Petersman, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I do. Just sorry, I had to get the phone out of my pocket to unmute it. I think the conversation about the financial piece is interesting, and I remember having those conversations when we sat at different sides of the table, Lisa. And I think that it's one of those things that we have to. I certainly accept the recommendation that was made by Mr. Cook. That we should consider coming up with providing some of that information. The concern is always that because it's the easiest piece for community members to focus in on, that's where they focus. And at the time, and I think even going forward, we really don't look at these decisions even as a major concern with the financial implications. It's always about what's best for kids, not what's best for our bottom line. And the minute that you put out financial information, it invites that conversation, and rather than people focusing in on what's best for the students, it becomes, is the data right? Are you going to save money? Oh well, you're doing it to save money. So it's always a difficult piece. But I accept the fact that we need to be transparent and provide that information. We're just going to have to make sure that we do it so that it doesn't become the focus of the ARC, should we need one in the future, unless that's why we went about it. But I would anticipate that we would continue to always look at what's best for kids. So that's just a little bit of context for that piece. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Petersma. Any other comments, questions? Thank you. Mr. Dawes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving on. The next item that we have is a call for a policy resolution, proposed amendments to OSPA Constitution. I'm going to ask Director David McDonald to start us off in this discussion.
Thank you. So I think some of you may recall that we had some discussions previously about possibly having some of these resolutions come forward. I guess maybe I should frame it a little bit first. OPSPA has the annual general meeting every year. This year, with the exception of when we have the Canadian school boards, it's the first week of June, so the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, don't know the dates exactly. 6, 7, 8 of June, and during that time with the AGM we have an opportunity as members, as board members, to make resolutions to the AGM to either deal with constitutional amendments or policy changes. So we've had some discussion in the past about making those resolutions coming forward. We had one previous trustee who on a regular basis would fire off the whereases, and we would have several motions going to OPSPA. The process is the board should support it. However, individuals can send a motion forward. If the board is supporting of a motion brought forward by trustees, that resolution is forwarded on to OPSPA with the proposed amendment or resolution that would be brought forward at the AGM. There is some review taking place with the executive of OPSPA between April 1st and the end of April. The end of April is a board of directors meeting. And at that point, the motions that are being presented at the AGM are brought forward for further discussion at the board of directors. So there is an opportunity to have some pushback by some member boards, some fine tuning perhaps of some language that's required, so that it can potentially not be so contentious on the floor at the AGM. We have two resolutions that we would like to bring forward to the board for consideration. The information that's being provided, and I'll let Trustee McAllister jump in a second. The information that's being provided deals with some of the work that we've done thus far as it relates to having chairs of boards communicate on a regular basis, or having access to chairs of boards, the ability, I guess, for chairs of boards to collaborate and receive information on a quick, very expeditious fashion, so that they can respond as chairs or bring information back to the boards. The second resolution that we're going to talk about tonight is something, or motion I should say, is that it relates to what is being framed in the province from a negotiation standpoint. We understand that there's something within the legislation that will look at provincial negotiations by 2014. And in order to do that, I believe, and I think the motion will undertake that, we need to have some common voice that represents boards of education. And so there's a motion that will be talked about that will potentially have that solution for us across the province and for our discussion. So I'll let Trustee McAllister talk to the individual motions, and perhaps we can have some discussion.
Thank you very much. Trustee McAllister, are you ready to go?
I am, sir.
And let it go. Thanks.
Could I ask if Lisa has the motions up on the screen, please?
Yes, we'll try to get that. Just give us a second there, Trustee McAllister. That's no problem.
Okay, we are ready
Can I
to go?
just, sorry, can I just jump in and just, before John gets going and just say that, is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, yes, certainly.
Just thank John. He bailed me out. Really, this was something that I had intended to get written up and did not. And John stepped in today to get these ready. So I appreciate the work that he's done, taking my notes and his knowledge to put it together. So anyway, that's just a little bit as to why John's taking the lead on this at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee McAllister, we've got it up on the screen.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. I want to also thank Lisa for her hard work in our last-minute deliberations on this issue and the toing and throwing of emails and whatnot. In any event, Chair, the educational scene in the past year or less has been quite charged, and communication has been of the essence amongst all parties. And our chair, Petersman in particular, has taken a considerable lead in the province in terms of bringing his colleagues, his chair colleagues, on board to at least discuss where they're going, what's happening in their schools, in their boards, in their areas. And I sat in on a meeting at one of the OPS conferences where Greg had sort of thrown a meeting together and opened it up to the public board and their leaders and their trustees. And while it was appreciated, I think there was a certain amount of concern expressed by some of the member boards because this was somewhat unprecedented. And the fact is that if I interpret this right, and the more veteran trustees on the board can address this if they wish, but there's no real allowance in the OPSPA constitutional structure to permit chairs of all boards in Ontario to come together to chat and to share common concerns. And what this motion wants to do is to bring it to the attention of the AGM in the hope that it can be passed so that in future, chairs such as Chair Petersma or anybody for that matter can call a meeting of chairs with proper notice, etc. So the purpose of the motion is to enable and facilitate meetings of chairs and designates of all boards under the auspices of OPSPA. And the function of such meetings is to improve communication and to strengthen activities of participating boards. And you can see in the general preamble there that we have stipulated that at least 2 member boards or chairs or designates upon request, OPSPA will facilitate a meeting via teleconference or a meeting in Toronto, presumably, or wherever. And we have set out a number of issues and criteria there. So all of which is to say, we want to bring a resolution to the AGM in June, I believe it is. And it's going to read something to this effect: be it resolved that OPSPA approves and supports the meeting of chairs and or designates of participating boards to achieve improved communication and shared planning of goals and objectives. So this is a motion that will be proposed by the Upper Canada District School Board, and we hope to do some work between now and then, if this is passed this evening, to promote this motion. And I think it sort of speaks for itself in that it's simply an issue of improving communication and strengthening ties between boards, because we are understandably one of 3 parties in this whole process. We are management, we have the government, and we have the union. And I think we need to have the opportunity to get our house in order and to speak freely. And that is the purpose of the motion, Chair.
Thank you very much. Chair Petersma, you want something to say, please? Phone still in your pocket, Chair Petersma?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
It wanted me to log back in.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy.
Comment?
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so there's a little bit of history here as to why this is the approach that we need to take. And thanks, John, for putting that together. That's exactly what we were we've been talking about. I have tried to organize ad hoc chairs meetings in the past, and I really don't believe that it needs necessarily a formal structure at this point. But there was always a bit of tentativeness amongst other boards and OPSPA and directors in this, and they were very suspicious as that it was some attempt to create a parallel organization that would supersede OPSPA's role in the discourse on public education, and that was never the intent. The intent is, as outlined in the John's motion. At the last AGM of Trillium Lakelands and us sponsored a meeting of chairs and directors, and at that point it became very clear that that's the direction that other chairs wanted us to go, was to have it under the auspice of OPSPA. Having said that, some of the non-chair members and some chairs said that they were very concerned that this not become a decision-making group inside OPSPA. So that's why we're clearly saying that it's really more an opportunity to discuss. I think that it's important that we try this route before we try anything else, or continuing to look for an independent organization of chairs to see whether the members in OPSPA will endorse this. So that's why we're taking this approach at this time, and hopefully the rest of the boards that asked us to do this step up and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. And just to echo Trustee McAllister's points, there is no formal process for OPSPA to be able to do this. Aside from the fact of having every chair of the board being the director on OPSPA, which is next to impossible because every board handles that task a little differently. To add to what Chair Petersman has said, certainly the chairs of other boards have indicated that they would like to have something like this. This is also, in my view, going to assist OPSPA. At times, the board of directors, more so the executive and administration of OPSPA, have some difficulty in to know whether they are overstepping their boundaries or certainly performing their function as an advocate for public education and supporting the public school boards in Ontario. I think this also helps OPSPA itself as a group to be able to do this type of exercise, partake in it, and allow boards to be even more collaborative and respond quickly, as we've said earlier.
Thank you. Trustee McPherson.
I wonder what the rationale behind 2-member boards. Why not 3? Given that there's 72 school boards in Ontario, it does seem like a very small number to trigger a request for a meeting. What was the rationalization for only 2?
Chair Peters, would you want to address that?
Sure. I use the model that, more than one would indicate that there was. I didn't think that 1 was appropriate. I'm not sure, once you start talking about 3, then why not 5? I think that 2 should be enough. I mean, it's still going to be a voluntary exercise. It's a low-cost exercise, so I'm not sure that there's a reason to try to discourage it, to increase the hurdle or to trigger a meeting. I think that 2 is enough, and it would be roughly, the same number of boards that were interested in going to the OLRB, as an example. So that's sort of the rationale. But I think that this would be a good starting point, and if need be, it can be modified if it's being abused or doesn't serve the purpose.
Okay.
The principle is what's really important.
Thank you. Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Originally, as this is proposed, it would only deal with the English Public School Board Trustees Organization, so that is approximately 30 odd. The notion that it could expand to other trustee organizations is an interesting one and something that could come in the future.
Mr. Buckland, just before you continue, can you just put your screen and move over so the microphone's a little more exposed? I want to hear that great voice of yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I like the idea. As an associate director at the moment and a past director, we meet for information mainly, and in the part of the PD group, you do hear ideas and you do promote the ideas your own board has, but it becomes something that you now must, in an ad hoc situation, direct to your chairman, say, this is what another board is doing. But if you have strength in the executive members, I think it will show. And this is the time when we need to be stronger as a trustee group. We've been assured just recently that we are a third of the tripartite, and that is good. But I see this, first of all, coming under the blanket of OPSBA, providing the clerical side. But I see it as an opportunity to be a stronger advocate for English public education at the legislative level.
Trustee McDonald. Actually, it's been covered. Any more comments on the phone lines? Okay, there seems to be a lot of support from what I can see. Yep. Yes, we're going to put a motion up front. I don't have it on this screen. Well, under normal conditions I can. Okay, I'm just going to turn around, and right now it's just red, green, blue, and white. I don't think that's going to cut it.
That was why I approved of it, an internship.
Okay, so there you go.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Just take it.
Okay. Okay, be it resolved that the Ontario Public School Boards Association approve and supports the meeting of chairs or designates of participating boards to achieve improved communications and shared planning of goals and objectives. So that's the motion that's being put forward.
Okay.
We've had good discussion on it. Any further discussion that we question? I need a mover. It moved by Trustee
I'll move
McDonald,
that, Chair.
seconded by Trustee Buckland. Okay. And, oh, there we go. We're on. Check your computers. And if you'd vote now, please. And,
Do you want me to put this back in now?
no, let everyone see what we're seeing here.
Here, I'm in favor. I can't move back to the other screen.
Okay, so, thank you. And so that everyone's in favor, it's passed. Thank you very much.
Jeff, it's Peter. I'm on, and I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, Peter.
Next resolution, you can have this to work from if you want. That's
Okay. So there's a second resolution, isn't there?
yeah, we'll talk about it. We can let Jeff and John talk about it.
Okay, so Trustee McAllister, you have a second resolution?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Okay, could you bring that forward now, please?
I will. I'd like to give a little bit of background, if I could.
Thank you.
There are three equal parties in this whole issue of negotiating salaries and benefits and working conditions. And those three parties, of course, are the government, the unions, and the board. The experience of the past year has shown that the boards were marginalized. And not only marginalized, but excluded as the McGuinty government reached or tried to reach agreement between various unions. Yet we, the board, under the Ontario Labour Relations Act, are the agents with whom the unions negotiate. So the purpose of this motion is to strengthen the role of OPSA as the bargaining agent of participating boards in any tripartite matters pertaining to negotiations at a provincial level involving the boards, the unions, and the government. That does not mean that there cannot be negotiation of local issues, but nevertheless, the broad strokes we all know occur at the provincial level, and I think it is imperative that we, as members of OPSA, be at that table as a full-fledged member, not just at the end of the process, but at the beginning of the process, during. So, therefore, with that in mind, that is the purpose of the motion. And I must make full disclosure as a former union leader, and I've used that experience for the benefit of this quite, usefully. So, whereas any Board of Education is the bargaining agent as employers under the Labour Act, whereas it's essential that boards of education act in an integral and united manner in discussions, be it resolved that OPSA be empowered to act as the united representative of all the boards of education in such provincial discussions or negotiations, and that staff, for future considerations, develop constitutional amendments to reflect such a mandate. Just for clarification, when I say staff, I mean staff of OPSA. So this is a motion that would be presented to OPSA by the Ethics Management District School Board.
Thank you. So comments or questions on this resolution? Trustee Cartner.
Are we seeing the whole resolution there that he's suggesting? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Those people that are on the telephone lines, we're getting a little bit of noise from the background, so if you're not speaking, would you mind just trying to mute the phones? Chair Petersma, do you want to make a comment on this? I know, he's in his pocket. While we're waiting, Trustee McCrae?
Yeah, I just recently read, through you, Chair, I just recently read that there may be legislation developed to mandate which components of contracts will be negotiated at the provincial level and which parts will be left up to boards and their local unions. So I guess my question is, in regards to this, what I'm reading into this is that there may be portions of the contracts that we may not have any say over anyway.
Well, I think the point is that we're asking that for those decisions that will be made at the provincial level, that OPSA would be present at the table, and that you can't leave the boards out of that discussion or that part of the discussion. So yes, there will be decisions still made at the local level. However, any decisions that are made at the provincial level must include our partnership as part of that discussion. Am I correct?
Regardless of how small those might be.
That's what we're hoping for with this resolution.
Okay. That's just what I'm saying, because in reading this,
yes,
it's saying that a lot of that's going to be done by the provincial government.
And yes, and if that's the case, we're saying our voice is still important there as well. Chair Petersma, are you ready to comment on this? Okay, anyone else on the telephone lines want to comment?
Through you, Chair?
Yes?
I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is to Trustee McDonald, what is OPSA's stance on this now?
Thank you. Trustee McDonald?
They don't have an official position on whether they should be the representative or not, but certainly they are actively involved with discussions with the ministry, and I can point back to what occurred 5 years ago? Around 4.5, 5 years ago, as it relates to the provincial discussion table discussions. They played a role within that, but didn't have an official capacity and really didn't have the authority to be anything further than more of a facilitator, more of a commenter, privately resource. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we have something in place that boards are represented in a unified way. And I think this is a good opportunity to set the stage. And OPSPA has the resources to do that. And I will say that OPSPA also farms out a number of those expertise that are required to our HR people in the field, as they do from time to time with the financial aspects as well. So they will be the coordinator and pull in resources from individual boards that have those expertise as well. But I think we need to make sure that OPSPA has an official capacity before the province puts anything else in place. This is kind of being ahead of the proactive as opposed to reactive approach.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Cartner.
I too support this, the motion. We have had very little say or no say in the past whenever the province has mandated things on issues on boards, and I think it's a good move to get OPSPA mobilized in order to face the government and come up with, to hear our voice from the boards that are involved as members of OPSBA. So I strongly support it.
Okay, great. Trustee Buckland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would first like to have the first whereas focus on one board, and this would suggest changing the wording to whereas the Board of Education is the bargaining agent as employer under the Labour Act for its employees. Would be my suggestion.
Chair,
Yes, Trustee McAllister.
I believe that is a good suggestion, and as a mover of the motion, I certainly accept it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. The second point, I think, has already been made, that informally OPSBA is there for advice, sometimes cogent, sometimes not listened to, but to officially set it in place is extremely important.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion, questions? So we do have a motion.
Through you, Chair.
Oh,
Sorry.
Trustee Swan, yes?
I'm just wondering if we could send this to other boards and ask for their support as well to put this through as a motion for their boards or other boards.
We will be doing
Trustee Buckland?
If I could respond, we will be doing that at the annual meeting.
Yes.
Whoever's presenting it, the director across
Yes.
from us.
Yes. Yeah, at the annual meeting, this will be presented to all boards. Like, everyone will be privy to this conversation. Trustee Cartner?
I also think there will be some lobbying going on prior to that annual meeting. I mean, we have a regional meeting coming up next week or 2 weeks' time, and next week. And I think there will be lobbying going on, and hopefully the deadline will be over by then for submissions.
Yes.
So we have to find support that way, as opposed to asking them to support the motion literally.
Yes.
Chair?
Yes, Trustee McAllister.
Each one has raised a good point in that if this motion is approved, as the other one was, and I do think that we will be sending it out in advance as soon as possible for discussion and consideration, because we want to arrive at the AGM well prepared.
Yes, certainly. I agree with that. Okay, so we have a motion. Chair Peterson, are you online now?
Yeah, but I don't think I need to add anything. I think everything's been covered. This is important. This is a good motion.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we've got the motion coming forward. Spin around and.
Jeff, if you want to read it there.
Pardon me?
It's right here.
Oh, do I have it right here in front of me?
Page 2. Right there, yeah.
This one here?
Except changes there.
Oh, yes.
Casey, would you change that to singular and plurals in the first line?
Okay, so the motion that is being put forward,
My suggestion.
Yes, thank you.
let's underline that and say it's Mr. Buckman's suggestion. Okay, it's whereas the Board of Education is the bargaining agent as employer under the Labor Acts for employees. Whoops. And whereas it is essential that boards of education act in an integral and united manner in any provincial discussions, be it resolved that the Ontario Public School Board Association, OPSPA, be empowered to act as the united representative of all boards of education in such provincial discussions, negotiations, and that staff for future considerations develop constitutional amendments to reflect such a mandate. Any additional discussion or questions? I need a mover. Moved by Trustee McCrae, seconded by Trustee Kartner. And I'll ask you to vote on your decision online.
I think as a point of order, I think actually Trustee McAllister moved it, didn't he? I mean, just by putting it on the floor, would that not?
Okay, so that's noted. Thank you very much. So it's moved by Trustee McAllister, seconded by Trustee Kartner. Those in favor, opposed?
Favor, Peter.
Thank you very much.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And that is unanimous, so it is passed. Thank you very much, Trustee McAllister and Chair Petersma, for your hard work on this. It certainly is appreciated. Okay, at this point in our agenda, we're going to have a motion to move into private session, Committee of the Whole. Moved by Trustee McPherson, seconded by Trustee McCrae. Those in favor?
All are in favor.
All in favor, so we're moving into private session. Thank you very much. Okay, we have our mics back on. We have a couple of trustees that we're just waiting for, but we're going to continue. Who do we have still on the phone lines?
John McAllister here.
Thanks, John.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Greg's gone.
Greg's gone, but he may be in and out. Okay, I need a motion to move back into the regular board meeting. Okay, moved by Trustee McCrae, seconded by Trustee McPherson. Just a show of hands, those in favor? Great, we're moving forward. Who is that man down there? Okay. We have a report from the Public Session Committee of the Whole, February 27th, 2013. There were 4 items discussed, and the following recommendation is brought forward to the board. And it was a recommendation to approve policy 220, conflict of interest. I need a mover. Moved by Trustee McAllister, seconded by Trustee McCrae, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve policy 220, conflict of interest, as presented. And I'll ask you to cast your votes.
I'm voting in favor.
Thank you, John.
Oh, there it is.
Trustee Garrow? In favor?
He's gone.
Okay, that passes.
Is Trustee Garrow in favor or not?
I'm in favor,
Yes,
Peter.
he is.
Trustee Swan?
Trustee Swan, are you in favor? It still passes. Okay. The labor update, I'm going to ask Superintendent Charlotte Patterson to give us an update, please.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. Just three items I think of interest for folks around the table. First of all, on March the 26th, ETFO Provincial distributed communication throughout the province advising its members that they were providing advice to suspend their council to withdraw extracurricular activities and voluntary activities. We have noted locally in our board that over the past number of weeks we've had considerable uptake in our extracurricular activities, and as recently as yesterday we gathered information from our schools, and I'm pleased to say that well over half of our schools are full speed ahead as it relates to extracurricular activities, so that is certainly heartening. And we're pleased to see that ETFO has issued that advice to its members. With respect to both OSSTF and ETFO on a provincial basis, they continue to meet with the government to discuss matters, as I understand, related to the current status and also on a going forward basis as it relates to negotiations in future rounds. There are some staff representatives there too, directors, HR, leads, finance. They are, as I understand it, serving as a resource to the government as they continue with their discussions with both OSSTF and ETFO. And lastly, just a reminder, I'm sure many of you know that the Upper Canada Board and the Trillium Lakelands Board filed an application with the Ontario Labour Relations Board regarding ETFO's bulletin, which basically advised its members to withdraw from voluntary activities or extracurricular activities. And it was our position that that constituted an illegal strike because in the presence of a collective agreement that was interfering with the normal operations of the schools. We continue to await a decision. The hearings are over. We spent 8 days in hearings at the OLRB, and we have been awaiting a decision and look forward to receiving that in the near future. That's all, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Patterson. Any questions or comments? Any comments, questions on the telephone lines? Thank you. Moving on to the next item, report from Special Education Advisory Committee. Trustee McPherson, will you give us a report from there?
Yes, we met on the 5th of March, and it was an interesting meeting. Kathy Blair chaired it. We had a presentation on smarter inclusion then and now from Alex Dunn, who is a speech and language pathologist with our board. Her presentation was on how to make the walls of your classroom disappear to allow more collaboration. She was actually quite successful in it because she made the walls of our boardroom disappear that night because she was actually in Alberta and came to us via webcast through the linked video system. And it was my first experience with it, I have to admit. And it was eye-opening, to say the least. It allowed us to have two-way interaction with her, and she was sitting somewhere in the Ministry of Education in Alberta, teaching them how well we do things in Upper Canada, which is a feather in our cap right there. We moved on from that to the various other parts of our agenda. During the trustees' report, we basically touched on the fact that we're waiting for a Labour Relations Board hearing to make a decision. It was noted that the secondary teachers had withdrawn their job action. Extracurriculars are returning to most of our schools, and we did discuss the Perth Family Schools 7 to 12 transition briefly. Under the superintendent's report, Susan reported on the Regional Special Education Council meetings, as well as the EGAL training for Upper Canada staff. I can tell you what UCDSB means, but I cannot tell you what EGAL means. But I'm sure Susan can enlighten you. Under old business, we had a very lively discussion on the Section J reports. As well, we do have an ad hoc committee working at SEAC on the funding under the Ontario Disability Services of Ontario Agency. They are hoping to present to the board at a yet-to-be-determined date. They will approach with some solution-based strategies, all means all, and they'd like to see, hoping to build on the success and capacity models that schools are already using to identify students. This will be in the future, and I believe next meeting we're actually having a presentation at SEAC from that particular agency. We did receive some correspondence from Durham District School Board, Kawartha Pine Ridge, Trillium Lakelands, Upper Grand, as well as the Ontario Brain Injury Association. So that concludes my report, and any questions, I will do my best to.
Thank you. Trustee McCray.
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to thank Trustee Richards for circulating that very disheartening email, actually, regarding how parents are expected to cope with all the challenges that seem to be thrown their way in dealing with trying to get help for kids with special needs. And I don't know, I'm sure other trustees read it, but it was very disheartening, and I don't know if there's any way that our board could bring that to the light of the Ontario Public School Board or any other organization, but it certainly is something that needs to be looked at. Did everyone read that?
Stress levels?
Yeah. Like, it's very real, and I mean, so many of our parents and our boards are dealing with that. Anyway.
Great concerns. Trustee Buckland.
Thank you. Question. Are there any extracurricular activities for special ed students?
I'm sure there are.
Okay, there are. Okay, so secondly then, was there any curtailment of these special extracurricular activities for special ed students during the cutback? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to whoever.
I can't answer the question myself. Superintendent Patterson, can
I can certainly start it off, and then perhaps Superintendent Hemming can add to it.
Okay.
Certainly, the model in Upper Canada is one of inclusion, and there are many activities that occur in our elementary and our secondary schools on an extracurricular basis, whether that be intramural or sports or other activities, arts, music, that would involve all students in the school if they so wish to be involved. So certainly from the point of view of including special needs students in extracurriculars, I think that that's what you would see in most of our schools. Now, there has been certainly an uptake in extracurricular offerings over the last few weeks. So there may have been a time when some of those special needs students were not engaged in extracurriculars because there were simply no extracurriculars going on. But certainly from what I see here, the preponderance of green on this, which basically describes extracurricular activities in both our elementary and our secondary schools, would indicate that that there are extracurricular activities going on in all of our schools, and certainly a very robust involvement in most of our schools.
Thank you. And secondly, I was pleased to learn that we're developing a campus in Alberta.
Superintendent Hemming, do you want to add some more to that? I mean, that's what happens when the director or acting director, when that happens, you see, they take the seat, they steal your thunder, and, I mean, I knew you were ready, you had us ready to go. I could have kicked her.
Sorry.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much for that report, Trustee McPherson. Okay, moving on, OPSPA Director and Trustee David McDonald, if you could, and Vice Chair, by the way, if you could in 10 sentences or less give us a report, I'm kidding, from OPSPA.
I can do it in one sentence.
One sentence.
No, two. Three.
You notice how it keeps stretching. All right.
The only thing I want to add to the report is there's a regional meeting of OPSPA this Saturday in Kingston. It's at a school, and I make sure that the information is sent out to you again. All trustees are welcome to attend. Please, if you're interested, come by. If we want to coordinate rides, we can do that. Board of Directors meeting the end of April. That's it.
Wow, I'm impressed. Thank you very much. And just before we end, we don't normally do this, but I'm going to ask Trustee McCray if she can just tell us a little bit, because this is dealing with Champion for Kids and fundraising and anything that can get some more money in the funds for our kids to help them is certainly something that needs to be spoken to. So if you can just very quickly tell us about this.
Yes, at our last Family of Schools meeting, we talked about Champions came up as an agenda item. And Principal Carol Dufour has taken on a great feat here. It's Champions for Kids Foundation, and it's a draw. And
would like to challenge all of our trustees to get involved in this. I've distributed tickets this evening, and I just want to let those trustees know that are online that I will be chasing you down as well. What this is for is, and it's incredible actually, the first prize is a 2013 Jeep Wrangler valued at $22,000, and then there's a Disney trip for 4 valued at $5,000, and third prize is a 50-inch LED TV valued at $1,000. And this will be drawn at the Champions for Kids golf tournament in Cornwall on July the 3rd. The tickets are $20 for a ticket or 3 for $50. And so I really encourage everyone to get busy and sell your tickets. Did
Thank
I
you.
miss something?
No, you didn't. I just don't know what, I just bought a new car, so I don't know what I'm going to do with the Jeep
Well,
Wrangler.
if you win it, you can send it my way.
Trustee Cartner?
We had a meeting this afternoon with Champions for Kids, and just a
Okay.
caution about the tickets that they are not to be sold to anyone 18 or younger, that according to the license. And don't approach anyone on the Champions for Kids committee because we are not allowed to purchase either. I can sell, but I cannot purchase one with my name on it.
And take your parents with you if you're going door to door? Okay.
Yes, thank
Trustee-
you.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Just to pick up on the Champions piece, the golf tournament is being held at the Cornwall Golf and Country Club on July 3rd. Very pleased to say that Principal Chris Booley and myself are co-chairing that event for the second time. We did it 5 years ago, so we're glad to have it back in the Cornwall area, and looking forward to seeing you all on the golf course.
Thank you very much.
I don't see me on a golf course.
You know, when I get in this seat, I mean, that means I get to make closing comments, and I have not. So I want to say thank you very much. It's been a great night. I need a motion to of adjournment. Moved by
Golf and Country Club on July 3rd. Very pleased to say that Principal Chris Booley and myself are co-chairing that event for the second time. We did it 5 years ago, so we're glad to have it back in the Cornwall area, and looking forward to seeing you all on the golf course.
Thank you very much.